Big Buck Registry's Deer Hunting Podcast, episode number 155. Fred Eichler, coyote hunting, common mistakes, and traditional bow hunting for deer. Please support our sponsors as they make this show possible. Today's show is sponsored by Morse's Sporting Goods. Big Buck Registry is a virtual museum of hunting stories. We preserve a piece of Americana by interviewing and recording hunters about their hunts and experiences from across the country. And who knows, maybe we'll learn a thing or two along the way that'll help us take our hunt to the next level.
Hey, this is Dr. Ken Nordberg. You're listening to my favorite podcast on the internet, Big Buck Registry Deer Hunting Podcast.
Hey, this is Kyle Rosner from Back to the Outdoors, and you're listening to my favorite podcast, the Big Buck Registry Deer Hunting Podcast.
Hey, this is Tim Salerno with Salerno Brothers. Hi, this is Randy Salerno with Salerno Brothers. Get ready to listen to another great episode of the Big Buck Registry Deer Hunting Podcast.
Welcome to another episode of the Big Buck Registry's Deer Hunting Podcast. My name is Jay, and you know what? There's nothing more important to me right now than having your ear for the next hour or so to talk with Fred Eichler and talk about predator hunting and traditional bow hunting. It's always an honor to have you joining us, and you know, every time you press play and give me the honor of having your ear for an hour, it's just absolutely mind-blowing. Filling in for Dusty Phillips this week, we actually have Mike Adams from the Up North Journal podcast, and he's on the air right now with us. Mike, what's going on?
Hey, man, what's going on? Just getting ready to celebrate the 4th of July.
Yes, happy 4th of July. It's America season.
You got that right, brother.
Yeah. So what's going on in your neck of the woods?
Oh, man, we just been doing some stuff up north at deer camp, getting ready for hunting season, stuff
Cool.
like that. And, just rocking the Up North Journal podcast.
Very nice. How's your crew doing?
You know, we've been busy lately. Just got back from an extended vacation myself, but part of that, we launched kind of a new part of Up North Journal. We've had the Up North Journal TV side a little bit. We did some stuff at ATA.
Yeah.
But, we've got a new guy on from down in Ohio that runs around with Mara, who's on our team, and they do a lot of fishing.
Nice.
So we just kicked off Team Kickerfish as part of Up North Journal. And he catches what they call the kickerfish. I didn't know what it was, but he told me it's the fish that puts you over the top when you're a tournament fisherman. So.
Oh, okay. So it's not a kind of fish. It's the fish that makes you win the tournament.
Yeah, it's one that kicks you over the top.
Yes,
so
the kicker.
he came up with a name, and we started Team Kickerfish. We went out, we caught a lot of bass.
That's cool, man.
It was fabulous.
That's
so,
awesome.
Shot a lot of video, and we're going to put that out there.
So are you letting Danny join you on any of these fishing trips, or is he's just kind of stays in the studio?
Well, you know what? Strangely enough, we took off without him. And he managed to find his way up north, and he found us on the second day and joined us. So,
nice.
we let him out of the bat cave here, so to speak, and, he got to spend some time with us.
Well, I'm glad you let him out. He needs to get out now and then. He gets a little cooped up.
Yeah, he causes trouble, if I keep him tied down. So,
yeah. Well, that's neat. I was checking out some of the stuff you had on iTunes, and, iTunes is, there's definitely a huge audio directory there, but there's also video you can get on all the iTunes podcast directories, and I noticed that you're dabbling in that. And actually, it was more than a dabble. It was quite a series of videos that you've been doing. Of course, you have the skill set to handle a lot of the video stuff, and stuff I don't really know about. Would like to learn about it, but don't know.
Well,
and
you need to come to Michigan. We'll teach you.
I'll fly to Michigan. I have a lot of friends in Michigan. Our news guy is from Michigan, so I guess we could do that. And I was actually watching the Mark Hammerbuck interview, which we had interviewed Mark, but I was watching the video, and I was standing behind you when you were doing that. It's like, I recognize this whole set. This is interesting.
Yeah. You mugged the camera on us. I seen you sliding through there, man. So I got to put that in there. I said, I got my buddy Jay in Tuscany. That was cool.
Yep, the old photo bombs, or video bomb in this case. That's
right.
Awesome, man. Well, so this week, Mike, we're talking to Fred Eichler, which I mentioned a little while ago. Fred's heavy into predator hunting. He's kind of known for his predator hunting, but he's also a very skilled bowman, and he's very good at the traditional hunting with a traditional bow. Likes those really close shots, those 26-yarders. And, he's got a good friendship with Chuck Adams, which reminds me of all that traditional bow hunting stuff. And I had a great interview with him this time. Dusty was with us as well, and Dusty couldn't be here because he's knee-deep in hay right now. It's haying season in Ohio, and unfortunately things break down. And sometimes you have bad days, and that's where Dusty is right now. So, Mike, he came to my rescue, and he said, hey, I will co-host with you for the segments here, and you bailed me out, and I can't thank you enough for doing that, brother.
Hey, man, I was glad to help out anytime.
Awesome. Well, let's get to Fred Eichler, but before we do that, let's turn to Jim Keller with the Deer News.
For the Big Buck Registry, this is Jim Keller with the Deer News. In our first story, feral plant and animal removal planned on Maui. This article was reported by the WestHawaiiToday.com website. An $830,000 proposal would remove feral animals such as pigs, axis deer, and goats from Haleakala National Park land. People have until July 14th to provide comments on a draft environmental impact statement released June 12th. The Maui News reported. Plans funded by the National Park and the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation call for restoring the area's natural habitat by removing non-native plants as well as feral pigs, goats, dogs, and axis deer. The park acquired 4,300 acre that make up the former New Ranch in 2008. The draft report says this is among the island's largest tracts of undeveloped land and is inhabited by endangered species. Without management and removal of feral animals within the Haleakala National Park new exclosure, other conservation activities are unlikely to succeed, the draft report said. Park spokeswoman Polly Angelakis said a boundary fence will start going up later this year. Feral animals would be directed outside the fence as it's constructed, but animals inside the fence would be killed. For additional details on this article, please check our show notes or the West Hawaii Today website. Wisconsin deer hunters cringe as wolf population increases by 16%. This article was reported by Alan Clemens on the deeranddeerhunting.com website. Deer hunters in Wisconsin have to be concerned with the latest information about the state's wolf population. In just 1 year, the wolf population has increased by at least 16%, according to surveys by the Wisconsin DNR. Packs rose from 208 to 222, and the average pack size rose from 3 to 3.8 wolves. Thanks to government and court decisions, there are no hunting or trapping seasons in Wisconsin for these predators. A federal judge in December 2014 placed the wolf in the western Great Lakes region, including Wisconsin, under protection of the Endangered Species Act, effectively prohibiting lethal management by state officials. The population represents a record high for the species in Wisconsin in the modern era. Hunting and trapping was allowed from 2012 to 2014, with more than 525 wolves reported killed to state officials. The wolves were returned to Endangered Species Act status by a federal judge's ruling when he declared them part of the protected western Great Lakes region. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service has appealed that decision. To deer breeders' opposition, Texas increases disease test requirements. This article was originally reported by buckbreeders.com. Texas state officials this past week approved increased screening requirements for chronic wasting disease, first discovered in Texas whitetail 1 year ago, in a new set of rules that introduces live testing for the neurological disorder. Previously, only testing on brain or glandular tissue from dead deer, elk, or moose was accepted by regulators to confirm or rule out an infection in Texas, similar to the process utilized by 22 other states affected with CWD. This is a great giant step in the right direction, Chris Timmons, president of Deer Breeders Corporation, said of the live testing initiative, which the Texas Parks and Wildlife Commission unanimously adopted Monday in the rules package that will take effect by August 15th. Support is widespread for using live tests on rectal or tonsil tissue to detect CWD, though many commercial breeders oppose the new rule that also tightened restrictions on when captive bred deer can be relocated to hunting sites and, for the first time, prohibit all releases into low-fenced properties. With hunting-related spending in Texas said to top $2 billion annually, a prime objective of the state is to safeguard its 4 million native deer, so the new plan includes additional restrictions on the relocation and release of stock by breeders, who each fall sell an estimated 25,000 to 30,000 bighorn bucks statewide in advance of hunting season. Fred Bryant, executive director of Cesar Kleberg Wildlife Research Institute at Texas A&M University Kingsville, also urged state officials to err on the side of caution. Prior to last June, when the first infected white-tailed deer was discovered at a breeding ranch in Medina County, CWD had only been found in isolated mule deer herds in the far West Texas region. The disease has been confirmed in 10 other captive-raised whitetails since then, say state officials, who, as a precaution, euthanized entire herds at some of the affected breeding ranches. For additional details on this story, please check our show notes or the buckbreeders.com website. Deer hunt to return to Blue Hills, this time with bows and arrows. This article was originally reported by Jessica Trufant of the Patriot Ledger newspaper. In Massachusetts, after sparking controversy last fall by sponsoring the first controlled hunt in the Blue Hills Reservation in more than a century, the state has proposed a second hunt later this year that includes more days, acres, and hunters, yielding both bow and arrows and shotguns. A 2013 survey conservatively estimated that the reservation is home to more than 85 deer per square mile, far more than the 6 to 18 per square mile that state wildlife officials aim for. The State Department of Conservation and Recreation last fall permitted 163 hunters armed with shotguns to roam nearly 3,000 of the reservation's 7,000 acres as part of a coordinated effort to cull a growing deer population that officials say has damaged vegetation and increased exposure to Lyme disease in the area. The 4-day deer hunt yielded 64 deer, including 47 female deer, equating to at least 120 fewer deer last spring, according to the state's report in the 2015 hunt. The state has put forth a plan for a second hunt spanning 6 days later this year, broken into 3 two-day segments. The proposal would allow 117 shotgun hunters and 23 archery hunters during each 2-day segment, or 140 hunters per each segment, and 420 total. For additional details on public hearings related to these proposed hunts, please check our show notes or the Patriot Ledger newspaper website. That concludes this week's edition of the Big Buck Registry's Deer News. If you have any ideas for future topics or have questions about any of these topics, please email me at jim@bigbuckregistry.com. For the Big Buck Registry, this is Jim Keller with the Deer News.
Thanks, Jim Keller, for the Deer News. And now, without further ado, here's Fred Eichler.
Fred Eichler, welcome to the Big Buck Registry's Deer Hunting Podcast. What's happening, brother?
Man, buddy, just doing great. Just got back from a Gould's turkey hunt in Mexico and going to the NRA show and then getting ready to farm here. So things are busy, but good.
That's awesome, man. Thanks for joining us on the show. It's always a pleasure to talk to a fellow hunter. And from what I understand, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that you're kind of known for predator hunting more than most other things. But that it doesn't stop there. You're heavy into all kinds of hunting all year round, and it sounds like you're growing food plots. It sounds like you're all in is basically what I'm saying.
Yeah, we have a lot of irons in the fire. I've run an outfitting business for last 25 years. We take about 150 clients for whitetail, mule deer, antelope, elk, bear, mountain lion, and turkey. So stay real busy with the outfitting. Bow hunting, do a lot of bow hunting. That's definitely one of my passions. But since I was a kid, I was always a trapper. I've done some damage control trapping in the state of Colorado, and avid trapper and an avid predator hunter as well. And kind of love it all. You know what I mean? It's one of those things that if it's got to do with the outdoors, I'm kind of in it. And we run a few cows, and we do a little farming, and so we try and squeeze as much into a day like you guys as possible.
That's awesome, man. Where are you from originally, Fred?
Originally from Florida.
Florida.
I used to work for Bear Archery in Florida. I used to live out in the woods there, and man, I'll tell you, I sometimes miss the hunting down there. When I was down there, I left when I was 19, but when I was down there, you could kill 2 deer a day for almost 6 months out of the year. So when I moved to Colorado to manage an archery shop, I was kind of blown away. I was like, what do you mean I can only shoot 1 deer a year?
Wow.
Like it was kind of a shocker for me because between whitetails and hogs and turkeys and waterfowl, what I had grown up, doing down there, it was a little different, a little different. So, but I think I've got a pretty good spot down here in southern Colorado, and we've got a lot of different species we can chase here as well.
Gotcha. So growing up in Florida, you must have taken to the outdoors as you just described. How did that all start? Did you have a dad or an uncle or somebody that kind of got you into it, or a family? Was your family into it?
Yeah, my dad was a super avid hunter. And so from when I was, earliest memories, it was either, bass fishing. And like I said, we grew up in the country where we could hunt in the back, out the back door. So, hunting whitetail deer and turkeys and hogs and trapping coons and possum and things like that. That was pretty much an everyday occurrence. Loved to hunt. And, one of my first jobs, was working in the archery industry, and, went on from there to start working at Bear Archery, and met a guy that offered me a job managing an archery shop in Colorado, and I kind of thought, boy, I've shot a lot of whitetails and hogs and turkey, and I'd sure like to trap some other stuff besides raccoons and possums and stuff. That'd be kind of a neat deal. Coyotes, badgers, and pine martens and all the stuff they have here in Colorado, as well as some of the great hunting out here for not only the predators, mountain lions and coyotes, fox, bobcats, a little bit of everything here. It was just another door to go through and some more experiences to be had.
Now, why Colorado and not some other western state?
Got offered a job here.
Okay.
Jim Whitmire, the owner of Aerodynamics, up in Fort Collins, Colorado, was actually down visiting bear archery in Florida, and walked into the shop one day, and we met, and he said, "I'm looking for somebody to manage my archery shop. How'd you like to work for me?" And really was impressed with the guy, nice guy, and it was the first time I ever got on a plane. He bought me a plane ticket to take a look at his shop. I hate to sound like too big of a redneck, but I told my dad, I said, "I don't know, this guy offered me a job. What do you think?" And he said, "Well, what do you think?" I said, "I don't know. I mean, I was such a small town, kid, and hadn't really been anywhere." And I told my dad, he said, "He offered to buy me a plane ticket." And he said, "Well, it might be kind of neat for you to, get on a plane." And so I was kind of excited. I got on a plane for the first time, and he flew me into Denver. It's kind of embarrassing, but I remember calling my dad collect because I had never seen those automatic flush toilets.
Oh,
I was like, "You're not going to believe what they have here." so Dad was kind of laughing at me. But Jim picked me up from Denver and drove me up to Fort Collins in northern Colorado, not far from Wyoming. And
sure.
And he kind of showed me some stuff here, and I was, by the end of the 3 or 4 day trip, I was ready to go. I mean, he showed me elk and bighorn sheep and mule deer and just a little bit of everything. And I thought, yep, this looks like where I need to be.
You need to set up shop right there. Got it.
Yes, sir.
That's awesome. So you obviously stayed in Colorado, and what happened after that? How old were you when that happened? Actually, when you got your job?
I was about 19 when I moved out here.
Okay.
And really, my life has been a series of lucky incidents, I guess you would say. Grew up hunting, like I said, worked for bear archery, and then Jim walked in, offered me a job managing his archery shop. So I was managing his archery shop, and got offered a job by another guy named Jay Dart, who started Dart International.
Yep.
That was after I'd worked for Jim for about 3 or 4 years, and was trapping. It was a great job. Jim was a elk guide, and he was a outdoorsman, and taught me a ton about not only elk hunting, but hunting a lot of different species in Colorado. So I had a couple really good mentors, not only on the trapping side, but on the archery side. And a guy named Jay Dart walked in one day and said he was inventing a computerized target system for archery at the time, but then we moved into firearm systems. And he said, "How'd you like to have a job?" And I said, "Well, what'll I be doing?" He said, "Well, we're going to go to the SHOT Show and archery trade show, and I'm going to show people this dart system, which is basically a huge screen. I don't know if you guys have seen it, but it's a huge, think of a trampoline almost stood up on its side.
Okay.
And you shoot arrows at it. Your regular field point, weights, but you have a blunt on the end of your arrow. It's your same arrow, same bow,
Yep.
but you screw a blunt on the end of your arrow. It bounces off the screen and lands on the floor. But we would play video of different hunting scenes. There would be an elk or a sheep or a bear or whatever walking across the screen, and you would shoot your arrow at the screen, and the same millisecond that the arrow hit the screen, the video would freeze, an overlay graphic would come up showing not only the kill zone on the animal, but where your arrow hit in reference to the kill zone.
No kidding.
So technology-wise, it was amazing. So the archery shop that I worked for, we had the first beta test site. They put the very first one up in the country there, and Jay Dart said, "Well, how'd you like a job setting these up all over the country?" Well, it was tough to leave the archery shop, but I started working for Jay Dart, and all of a sudden, redneck kid from North Florida is all of a sudden traveling all over the world. I mean, I installed dart systems in every state in the U.S. and was in Mexico and Africa and China, just all over the place installing these computerized target systems for both archery, and then we came up later with a firearm system.
Oh, wow.
So it was a really neat job opportunity.
So at 19, you started traveling.
Well, I worked for Jim for about 3-4 years, so I was in my about 24, I guess, 24, 25 when I went to work for Dart International.
Still, at 24, traveling the world must have been mind-blowing.
It was very much so. But the great thing about it is guys in the hunting and, firearm industry, they're just great people, So I was going into, even though I was traveling, I was walking into gun shops, archery shops, places that I felt right at home with, people I felt right at home with. So, I was single. It was a really neat opportunity to travel all over the country and just had a blast. Did that for 6 years. So
awesome.
it was a really neat experience.
So when did you get into predator hunting? It sounded like you came from an archery background. Was predator hunting still part of your experiences in Florida, or was it something that you kind of progressed into once you got out west?
No, it definitely started out as a young man, like I mentioned in Florida, trapping. I used to, trap coyotes and possums and, all kinds of stuff in Florida. So, I shot bobcats and, we didn't have many coyotes back then at that time. But a lot of the other predators, man, I was all over them. So it was, when I came out to Colorado, it was just another step. And, man, I can, instead of trapping raccoons, I can trap badgers. And, instead of trapping, possums, I can trap, bobcats and coyotes. And just, it just kind of took a step up, I guess you'd say.
Gotcha. All right. Very, very cool. Let's talk about some of the predator hunting that you've done and talk about some of your techniques to make us a better predator hunter. And in my opinion, and I mean, you may have a different opinion about this, it seems like as a hunter, you owe it to yourself to become a predator hunter too. Just to keep the predators at bay, give them some kind of predator. Actually, keep their population a little lower so that your other populations can thrive a little bit more. Not that you can ever eliminate them, but that just seems to be a good plan of attack. To be a deer hunter, should also be a coyote hunter, that kind of thing. What's your opinion on that?
I agree with you 100%. I would probably even take it a step further and tell you that trapping, and predator hunting has made me a better big game hunter. As I started the outfitting business back. It's been almost 30 years ago here in Colorado. Well, it's my 25th year, owning the outfitting business, but I started guiding, earlier, and spending that much time on ranches and, out in the field, I learned so much from trapping and hunting predators that I could carry over and apply to big game hunting. So I would say, one, it's a great thing to do just to become a better hunter, learn more about scents, learn more about how the predators react. Because if you know a lot about the predators, well, then you know more about the prey. And for the management aspect, like you mentioned, 100%, you're doing game animals a huge favor. I mean, here in Colorado, for example, 70% of the antelope mortality is based on coyote predation. You're every time you shoot a coyote, you're saving probably a couple antelope every year. So I would 100% agree with that. And even with larger tier predators like mountain lions, for example, mountain lions on average are killing a deer every 7 to 10 days. So, theoretically, you could have a mountain lion that's killing 52 deer a year. So for every mountain lion you harvest, you just save 52 deer.
Right. Exactly. And that's exactly the kind of thing. But I like your concept there, where not just coyotes, but all predators should be hunted as well.
Oh, 100%. Not only for the management aspect, helping all the other small game and the large game, but also for making you a better hunter overall. I think it definitely increases your skill level.
Skill level, exactly. Like, speaking of skill level, let's talk about some of the basics that you've employed over the years. When you might, going back to Florida, you learned a lot about how to do this correctly, and I'm sure you've learned a lot about how not to do it correctly. Can you share with us some of the things that you learned along the way that you thought, looking back, was probably some of those things that we shouldn't do as a coyote hunter, for example?
Educating coyotes. I've made a lot of mistakes, especially early on. I think I was a very efficient trapper. I was very proud of how efficient I was trapping, but I was trying to add basically to my fur harvest. So when I was working at the archery shop in Colorado at 19, as you guys can imagine, I wasn't making much money. I think I was making $18,000 or $19,000 a year, and I had a payment on a beat-up old Jeep and trying to pay for an apartment, and any option to get some extra money was huge. So I spent a lot of time trapping, and the owner of the shop encouraged me to make extra money and spend time doing what I wanted to do, especially in the winter when the archery shop wasn't super busy.
Yeah.
So I supplemented my income a lot by not only trapping but also going out and calling coyotes. But what I learned is, you can educate a coyote very quickly. They're super smart, adaptable animals. And by not calling enough, by not setting up properly, and that's the big thing. And people think I'm kind of anal. I'll have people come out coyote hunting with me, and I may spend as much time finding the right spot to set up as I will calling. And I'm like, no, you don't understand. If we set up wrong, and a coyote comes in and he busts us, or he circles and gets downwind, and we don't have an opportunity to shoot him, that's a coyote we'll probably never call in again, or at least it'll be a lot more difficult to ever call him in.
Right.
So because I relied on that for money, I was very, very serious about it. So, a lot of the things I learned was proper setup. By setting up, that's probably the biggest mistake a lot of beginners make is setting up properly. And you also have to understand that back when I started, there were no electronic calls besides the Johnny Stewart, the old tape call.
Yeah, right.
And that required, a big battery, and you had wires and a speaker, and, it just wasn't. And if it was below zero, it wouldn't play very well, especially as dirty as mine got. So, it was this was all mouth calling. And the problem, I shouldn't say problem, but the tough thing about when you're mouth calling is the predators are coming directly towards you. So you've got either a frontal or a quartering to you shot generally, and if they circle downwind, they're gone. So that setup is super, super important. And movement, you've got to take your hand from the call. If bobcat or coyote was coming in while you were calling, then you had to take that call and move it down and get to your gun. And so the full camo was key. Learned a lot about how to be a better predator hunter, I think, by mouth calling. Wouldn't call as far. My sequences were shorter. So when the electronic calls came out, and for me, I use a Fox Pro. There's a lot of good ones on the market, but I like the speakers. I like the volume level that I can get on a Fox Pro and the myriad of sounds. I've got hundreds of sounds at my disposal. But the key to that is being able to set that call out where if an animal does circle downwind, he's right in front of me. A lot of guys use an electronic call and they place it too close to themselves. I put it out, 50 to 75 yards. So if an animal does circle the call, or maybe it's been called before or is educated, or somebody else is called, I'll take advantage of being able to put that call away from my position.
Gotcha. Now, do you predator hunt all over the country, or is it mostly out west?
All over. I think I've shot coyotes in 20-some states.
Okay.
So, yeah, from Florida to California to out east to, and a lot of fun states where guys go, oh, man, well, Midwest, for example, there's a lot of states that are really tough to call coyotes in because out west it's easy. When I say easy, it's everything's a challenge, but, there's more coyotes here. It's wider country. Per square mile, we've got more coyotes than a lot of places in the east or even in the Midwest. But when you get out there where, the land's smaller, I can go up here to the San Isabel National Forest that's right across from my place here, and it's 1.3 million acres. A lot of country to run around in.
Wow.
When I go to the Midwest or Florida, a lot of it's small tracts. Maybe, you might have permission to hunt 40 acres or even the public land or state land areas or, maybe 1,000 acres or a couple thousand acres compared to hundreds and hundreds of thousands out west. So odds are, especially with the popularity of coyote hunting, those coyotes have heard a call. So what's kind of been great about predator hunting is it's growing, and it's, a lot of people are getting in the sport, and we're really getting back to where we're managing the predator populations. The disadvantage for avid predator hunters is we've got a lot more educated coyotes out there. So, I was calling in North Carolina, and I actually was doing a talk about predator hunting, and the guy I went with said, man, a lot of guys don't have a whole lot of luck out here. And, when I was doing my talk, I said, how many people, predator hunt? A bunch of hands went up. And I said, well, how many people, have a lot of luck, maybe shoot, 5 coyotes a week or, whatever. And, a lot of hands went down. I said, well, how many people play a rabbit in distress? And almost every single hand went up. And I'm like, aha. Well, I never play a rabbit in distress when I'm in areas that I think have been called before. And even though that's a super popular call and one that almost everybody starts out with, being able to play other sounds, you'll have a lot more success with coyotes that are educated.
Okay.
So if I go into areas that maybe have a large turkey population, I'll play a turkey in distress. I'll play, during cabin season, even here at home or, when I'm somewhere else in North Carolina or Florida or Georgia, if I'm set up near rural areas or I see some cattle I'll play a calf ball or a calf in distress. Almost every coyote's been either after a calf at one time or hanging around cattle yards and eating the afterbirth. So, I have a lot of luck by switching up and using calls that everybody else isn't using. Same with coyote vocalizations. So there's a lot of things you can do to really increase your success, even in areas that are pressured a lot by other hunters. Because I've had coyotes that would never come into a rabbit call come running in like they've never heard the call if you go with a rabbit or a totally different sound they haven't heard before.
Okay. So it sounds like you pay attention to the surroundings. Like what are your native animal populations in the areas they're hunting, and then you start to apply that to some of the calls that you may have on your Foxborough.
Yes, to a degree, 100%. It's great to know the native populations, but interestingly enough, a distressed animal is a distressed animal. And
Okay.
I've made a point out of playing, like, for example, a snowshoe hare. There's no snowshoe hares in Florida or California, but I've had coyotes run into a snowshoe hare because it sounds totally different, than maybe a regular rabbit in distress or jackrabbit in distress that people play a lot. So,
Okay.
An animal in distress is an animal in distress. And even in Africa, I've played sounds that, of animals that weren't indigenous to Africa, and again, the snowshoe hare or a prairie dog in distress or, a wounded shorebird. I've played that in Central Africa where animals come running in, nowhere near an ocean, nowhere near a snowshoe hare, nowhere near certain animals that I may be playing. But a distressed animal is a distressed animal. They key on that sound.
Gotcha. Oh, that's interesting. It's fascinating, actually, to think that a distress call is a distress call no matter where you are, and it doesn't have to be any kind of particular animal. That's really interesting. So I guess part of the reason that I'm kind of picking your brain on some of these calls is that both Dusty and I are just recently acquired new Fox Pros, and we both want to get into coyote hunting more than we ever have. And
Awesome.
So it is awesome. It is. They're fascinating devices, and boy, are they amazing. So let's say that for me and Dusty, who are kind of novices at coyote hunting, Dusty's killed coyotes, but I wouldn't say that there's a focus on coyote hunting. I've tried. I've called them with other calls. Haven't put my Fox Pro into play yet, but I would like to know what your opinion is. So for that guy who, and we have listeners all over the country, for that guy who just picked up their first Fox Pro, what types of things should we be running through our head as far as calls and setup?
One of the first things, no matter what call you use, a common mistake that guys make, and I certainly made it, that's why I know it, is playing the volume too loud. And I know that sounds like a simple thing, but a lot of guys, and me in the beginning, when I first turned on my Fox Pro, I was like, man, if that sounds good at a 10 volume, then a 30 volume is going to sound even louder and even more distressed.
Right,
and
that makes sense.
The sound will carry even farther. Well, what I saw is that I would have animals come in and then flop ends and take off. And I thought, what is going on? My wind's great. My setup's good. I don't understand what's happening. Well, what I was doing is nothing. It doesn't matter how great of a speaker that you have in the Fox Pro. If it's too loud, it's too loud. It doesn't sound natural. So coyotes are tuned in to hear a mouse squeaking, at 100
Right.
yards. I
Right,
mean,
right.
they have incredible hearing. So to draw them in closer, you're a lot better off playing a lot lower volume. And a neat way to kind of gauge that, especially if you're in the Midwest or even almost anywhere you hunt, especially a lot of the rural areas, almost everybody's got some farm dogs, you know what I mean, or hounds. I've got 21 dogs myself. So, but if I set up somewhere, you'll usually hear, especially in areas that are, maybe there's a few rural farms around, you'll hear dogs start barking to the call when you start playing the call. And it will blow you away how far that volume's reaching a coyote or a bobcat or a beaver, or not a beaver, sorry, badger. It'll blow you away how far they can hear it. So less is usually better. And even though you can barely hear it, a coyote can pick that sound up at 500, 600, 700 yards and come in. So I do play with it a little bit based on the terrain I'm hunting, for example. If it's windy, rainy, or snowy, let's say it's snowing or sleeting, things like that will keep that call from carrying as far, and then I may bump up the volume. But I very rarely go over like a 23, 25 on my call, even though it'll go quite a bit higher to really bring those coyotes in. You know what I mean? By keeping it at a little lower volume, you're going to have a lot better luck as far as bringing them in close.
Gotcha. All right. That's exactly what I wanted to know. So,
oh, yeah. Well, there's so many little idiosyncrasies, just like anything that you learn. You think how much you've learned deer hunting from when you started to now, or elk hunting or bear hunting or whatever your true passion is. And with predators, the other great thing about the Fox Pro is taking advantage of the remote, being able to move that call out further away from your location. Animals, tend to circle downwind, just like when we call in an elk, or even if you're bleeding at a deer, a lot of times it'll circle downwind. Predators, especially in areas where there's larger predators. So if I'm calling a bobcat, for example, that bobcat may come in slow for a couple reasons. One, they're more of a stealthy, sneak up and pounce on something hunter. But two, I think when they hear a dying, anything, they're wondering if there's another predator there that's killing it. In other words, that predator could turn and kill them. So, by using a decoy, by setting the call out in front of you, so if an animal does circle around, even if he successfully circles around without you seeing it, with the call being out in front of you, they're usually going to be broadside and right in front of you when they go to circle downwind and try and scent that call up. So, or take a look at it and see exactly what is dying. So I also use a decoy in conjunction almost all the time. I think that it's not only do you have the audible, sound of an animal dying, but then you've got a visual too, and they see something flopping around, and it just adds a little more realism to that setup.
When you say
I don't want to bore you. I could talk all day about it. I love it. There's so many little things about each setup.
You're not boring us, Fred. We're all in, brother.
When you say you set up your speaker and your decoy, how far out do you set that on a typical setup?
Good question. And again, guys, that varies. And I wish I could just say, boy, every time I go with 30 yards. It varies so much on the terrain. One of the things, and you have to understand with the show too, when some of the guys from the industry were coming out here and they'd go into my fur shed and see, 100 coyotes, stretched and dried and getting ready to be sold, they were like, wow, hey, we'd love you to do a predator show maybe. So, I continue to use a lot of the stuff I grew up using. But what was great about it is, there's so many little things you take into consideration, whether it's the terrain or, I'll move the call, upwind a lot of times. Let's say I got a wind blowing from the right to the left. Well, a lot of people want to put that call out at 12 o'clock straight in front of them. If I've got that wind blowing from right to left, instead of putting that call out at 12 o'clock, I may move that call out, 40, 50 yards, but then I'll move it to the right another 20 or 30 yards into the wind. So if the, coyote or bobcat or badger, whatever fox, whatever I'm after, circles downwind, it's directly in front of me at that 12 o'clock. So, trying to look at cover, brush lines, ditches, figuring out if you were a predator, how could you approach that call and that decoy without being seen the longest? Odds are that's the way they're going to come in. So, it's neat to kind of break that down. And, I'm really fortunate in the fact that not only do I get to hunt all over, and, not only different countries, but different states, but here in Colorado, we've got everything. We've got red fox, gray fox, swift fox, coyotes, bobcats, badger, raccoons. We've got just a myriad of predators that we can constantly call, and I try and learn every time I call something in.
Gotcha. Can you use the Fox Pro for other predators too? Will they respond?
Everything. I've called in leopards, alligators. I've called in dingoes in Australia. I've called in, literally all kinds of wolves up in Canada. I've shot 2 wolves, one in Alberta. I had 3 come literally running into 15 yards of a lone wolf howl. So that's the great thing about having so many different sounds at your disposal is you can call in a ton of different animals. It's just awesome. What you do have to watch is game laws in different states. Some states you can't call in big game. In other words, you can't use an electronic call in Colorado here to call in bears or mountain lions. I've had both come into the electronic call when I was playing it, but you can't legally harvest one over an electronic call. You have to go to a mouth call if you're going to call, for those species. So, but different states and different countries have different regulations on what you can use electronic calls for. So it's always good to check your regulations. But yeah, I would tell you, you'd be hard pressed to find anything that a Fox Pro couldn't call in.
Wow. All right.
Because of the amount of sounds available to you. If I'm going wolf hunting, I download a bunch of wolf sounds. If I'm going, anything, jackals, or you know what I mean, you can download just, even baying hounds. To give you an example of something that's not really common, Fox Pro put baying hounds as an option for sounds because a lot of people that are hunting in areas with wolves, maybe they were mountain lion hunting, running a pack of hounds, wolves were keying in on the hounds, baying or barking as they're running a trail, and wolves would come in and wipe out a guy's pack. Well, some of these dogs are worth thousands and thousands of dollars. So, if a guy loses a hound or, heaven forbid, a whole pack of hounds, that's a lot of money. May put somebody out of business or, certainly killing animals that he cares about. So the baying hounds is a sound that they added where you can go out and use that and attract wolves and predators with that sound even. So it really is neat how many options they have available.
That's fantastic. So let's transition a little bit out of predator hunting and talk a little bit about your whitetail hunting that you like to do with your bow and arrow. I've noticed that you like to go a lot with the traditional bow, and it seems like you and I think Chuck Adams have a friendship going on, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, sir. Yeah, there's kind of a friendship and a camaraderie there. We both completed the Super Slam, so we always have a lot of stories to share together, and are both avid bow hunters.
Gotcha. So why the bow? I mean, why not the gun?
I like the gun for predators, but the gun is, you know how it is, guys. With a gun, it's not as much of a challenge shooting something at 100 yards or 200 or 300 or whatever you're competent out to, as it is grabbing a recurve or a longbow or even a compound and having that same deer or elk or bear or whatever into 5 yards to 25 yards. The adrenaline rush for me is why I do a lot of it. Not only for meat on the table, but also for what gets me cranked up, and having animals close, and using a bow. It's hard to top that.
Gotcha. What kind of bow are you shooting?
I'm actually shooting a Hoyt recurve. It's called the Buffalo that I helped Hoyt design. It's a signature bow they did with me, and it was really neat because I had a lot of say in how we designed that particular bow and what I wanted. Having hunted a lot with a recurve, so that's what I use the majority of the time. I use a compound occasionally. Some situations are just more suitable for being able to reach out a little farther. But I would say the recurve is definitely my favorite.
Okay, so you prefer the recurve over the compound for the most part?
Yes, sir.
Wow. All right, so you're a purist at this point, and I haven't gotten to that phase yet in my life where I can drop the compound. At some point, I'm going to pick up a recurve, but I feel like I don't have all my skill set where I want it just yet. When did you decide that was a good transition for you?
Yeah, you know what? I guess I was about 20 when I picked up the recurve, and I just haven't looked back. I just there's something about it. It also turns anything into a trophy. When I shoot something with the recurve and no sights, no release, no pins, it's a simpler setup. And in a lot of situations, I think it's a more effective hunting weapon. I can shoot it from different angles. I don't need to, necessarily know the yardage every time. You can shoot it faster. I had a fun deal with a buddy of mine years ago that also used to work with me at Bowhunter magazine, and he was kind of asking me the same question. It was like, why do you like the recurve so much? And I said, well, I tell you what. And we got out, and I had some deer targets out, and I said, let's consider an 8-ring or a 10-ring, you know what I mean, a dead deer. So, we're not going to, subtract if it's something in the 8-ring. I said, you say go, and we'll both draw back and shoot that deer as quick as we can. He said, okay, and he was shooting a release, compound, and he said go, and I drew back and shot the deer, knocked another arrow, drew back and shot the deer, and we both let our third arrow go at the same time. So it's a faster weapon, especially in close-range situations. I think, within 20, 25 yards, a lot of times it's a more efficient weapon because you can shoot faster and it's quieter to draw back. there's a lot of different advantages. There's advantages and disadvantages to everything, but to me, I see a lot of the advantages with the traditional equipment. And your average, like if you look at Pope and Young, for example, out of all the entries, I think the last time I checked was about a year, maybe even 2 years ago, there were 67,000 whitetails entered into Pope and Young, and the average distance for all of them was 26 yards. So,
wow.
You don't necessarily have to reach way out there. That's out of 67,000 entries that there were at the time. The average shot distance was 26 yards. So, that's kind of a neat deal.
No question, you got to be closer with a bow, and definitely, I would assume you got to be a little even closer with a recurve, which raises the question: how do you get as close as you do in order to take that good shot? What kind of techniques do you employ, and what have you learned over the years?
Well, you guys are hunters as well, and it's basically the same things you do for anything, except bow hunters have to pay even more attention. I don't think you can ever fully eliminate human scent. I think there's some things you can do to help mask it a little bit, or certainly scents and lures, like Conquest or some of the other scents that you can use to help lure animals closer. But bow hunters and myself as well, I'm constantly looking for pinch points, funnels, travel routes, water if I'm hunting dry areas, things that I can do to get that animal as close as possible. And that's part of the challenge. You have to pay even more attention to where you set your tree stand. You have to make sure your clothing is quiet. We've all worn clothing that you go to move and it makes noise, or you make noise on the bark of the tree that you're sitting against. So there's so many more things that you have to pay attention to that'll totally blow a setup if you don't. So I always try and pay attention to the wind, not only wind direction, but also where the sun's coming up. And if it's overcast and I'm setting a tree stand, I'm going to figure out real quick where's east, where's west. Am I going to set this for the morning, and is the sun going to be in my eyes, or is it going to be in the deer's eyes? There's so many small things that you have to take into consideration. It's like a chess game, and I think that's part of the passion there, for me.
When you talk about quiet hunting clothing, what do you prefer as far as camouflage when you're archery hunting?
My favorite one, bar none, is Max 1. I just love Realtree's Max 1 because I think it blends in anywhere. Back when we had black and white viewfinders for cameras, it was the only camo that I could have on where my cameraman would say, unless you move, I can't see you in this thing. So I've got to look over the viewfinder and figure out where you're at when I'm head-to-toe camo. So, that and just looking at it when I'm blending in, whether it's wide open, whether it's rocky, whether it's, thick trees, for me, that's my go-to pattern for almost anything, unless there's a lot of snow out, and then I'll swap over to a snow camo.
Gotcha. Yeah. Any particular material that you prefer in that? Does it come in different variety of material?
Yeah, you know what it does? You can get all kinds of different materials, but I definitely like the quieter. There's some synthetics that are real quiet because I do a lot of backpacking or hunting where I've got to have clothing that's built for the terrain. I like some of the specialized clothing. Nomad has got some really good stuff out that's quiet. That's I won't say it's 100% waterproof. I don't know if anything could be 100% waterproof, but water resistant in case I get into some rough weather conditions. So the biggest things I'm looking at is is it good clothing? Is it going to be quiet? And can I layer up without carrying a ton of stuff and still stay warm?
Gotcha. It only makes sense to dress accordingly to your terrain that you're hunting. When you talk about tree stands, what particular tree stand is your favorite to spend times in the whitetail woods?
Man, you know what? There's a bunch of great stands out there. Maristep makes some great ladders that I use. I'm kind of a fan of ladder stands, to be honest, just because of the safety issue. I take a lot of clients that hunt on the same stands that I hunt, or that I'm going to be hunting after they're done. So the safety with a ladder stand, I like that. Always wear a safety belt. I've had some buddies that have had some terrible accidents. So I think safety is super important. The lifelines. I put the lifelines on pretty much everything. The big problem, whether you're calling in to a ladder stand or a tree stand, is coming out while you're either going in or coming out. and it doesn't take too much to have a lifeline set up and a hunter safety vest or something that's going to keep you from not only either dying or certainly crippling yourself.
Right. Yeah, it only makes sense. What when you're talking about shooting your recurve, what kind of arrows do you shoot out of that?
It's kind of funny you say that. I was working on an article for Bowhunter magazine, and I included in there a picture of the very first deer I shot in my early teens, and I was using an old used Ben Pearson bow. We didn't grow up with much money, so most of the hunting stuff was used, but maybe even had used hunting clothing back then. And the first camo I bought was actually Jim Crumley's tree bark, which I was really proud of. I don't know if you guys remember that.
I don't remember that one. Sorry.
Yeah, it was old school. It was awesome. And then Real Tree and stuff came out. But the old Jim Crumley tree bark. But I had Easton arrows, the old Game Getters and XX75s, and a Muzzy broadhead. And at the time, Muzzy had just come out with their broadheads. So it's kind of cool to look back and go, wow, here it is. Gosh, I don't know. Let's see, 30 years later, and a little bit more than that, I guess. 35 years later, and I'm still shooting the Easton arrows and still shooting the Muzzy broadheads. So I'm kind of one of those guys. If it's not broke, don't fix it. If it works for you, stick with it. The only change I guess I've made is I went from the aluminum to the new carbon axis. I really like that small diameter shaft.
Gotcha. Yeah, it only makes sense to stick with something that's working time after time.
So, Fred, one of the things that we like to do on the show is we like to go on a deer hunting adventure with our guests and kind of go back in time and act like we're sitting on your shoulder, play-by-play kind of thing. I was wondering if you could think of a memorable deer hunt that you've been on that meant a lot to you that you might share with us.
Sure. I'll give you the story on my first one.
Perfect.
Because that kind of, it's things like that impact your life for the rest of your life. And my dad, to set the stage, my dad was not a bow hunter. My dad was an avid rifle and muzzleloader hunter. And like a lot of guys, old school, he didn't know if a bow was really an efficient weapon for hunting. And I convinced him as a young boy to, that I really wanted to bow hunt. I'd read Fred Bear's field notes, and man, I really want to bow hunt, Dad. I really want to bow hunt. So convinced him to get me that old used Ben Pearson and my Easton arrows and that brand new broadhead at the time, the Muzzy, and we went out to a management area, public land in Florida, and my dad dropped me off because he was going to go scout for the muzzleloader season that was going to be starting up in a few weeks. And I sat for a little bit, and in the palmettos, didn't have tree stands. I think Baker was the only tree stand out at the time, manufactured tree stand. And I only sat on the ground for a while and decided to get up and start kind of still hunting, just going slow through the woods. And I was slipping through a palmetto thicket and caught some movement. And I remember I thought it was a squirrel because it didn't move again for a minute. And I just stood still and stared at the area. And all of a sudden I saw a deer. And it was a young deer just like I was. I was, in my early teens. And this little buck was a little 2x2. And he was walking through the woods. And he was feeding and had no idea I was there. Of course, I wasn't paying attention to the wind. It was just lucky that he was upwind from me. And this little deer came walking by, and I wish I remembered the yardage. I have no idea. Probably didn't even use one of the pins on my bow. I was so excited. But as this deer came walking by, I drew back my little bow and, a nice shot. And as soon as the arrow hit that deer, and just lucky, the shot was good. And whether the deer ducked into it, whether I shot low and the deer ducked into it, I'll never know. But it hit him in the chest, and I broke every rule of bow hunting. I took off at a dead run after this deer as soon as the arrow hit it. And fortunately, the deer didn't make it, 30, 40 yards and dropped. And when I got up to it, I was just overcome with emotion. Like, wow, this is unbelievable. Just, the elation of being able to harvest an animal, any animal with a bow and arrow was it was a life-changing event for me. It was, honestly, it was just like, man, this is the coolest thing ever. And I remember just being blown away that my dad wasn't that far away, and he had no idea I had just shot a deer because they're so quiet. It didn't make any noise. When I was muzzleloader hunting or rifle hunting, when we heard a gun go off in the swamp, we knew it was probably him or me. But in this situation, he had no idea. So what killed me is waiting for Dad because I was so excited. I wanted to show him and everything. When he finally got there, I showed him this deer, and it just blew him away. And it was really neat because he wanted to see everything. He's like, let's backtrack and show me where you were standing. Like, well, I took off running, but I was somewhere over here. And he ended up following the blood trail backwards, figuring out where the deer was. And it blew him away how quickly and cleanly, and efficiently it had taken that deer down. And I look back at that a lot because I go, had I not made a good shot, or maybe missed, not only would I have been disappointed, but, had I wounded that animal, my dad would have probably said, no, that's it. You know what I mean? That's not really what I want you hunting with. But when he saw how quickly an arrow and a broadhead and a bow could take down an animal, he was all for it and started bow hunting with me the next year. So, that was a big one for me, guys. So I hope I didn't burn up too much time telling you the story, but that was it.
Oh, heck no. You can't burn up time on the Big Buck Registry telling a deer hunting story, by the way. It's impossible. Great story.
I love it.
That's good.
So there's a walk back in time for you. My very first whitetail with a bow.
How old were you again?
I was in my early teens, and me and Dad, neither of us could. We tried to figure out exactly when it was, and I don't know, but it was early teens. So, yeah.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, many moons ago now.
Do you have any deer hunting questions for Fred before we get into the 10 rapid fires?
I don't right now. That was just a great story, Jay.
Great story,
it's tough just thinking about your first deer hunt, it like brought back every memory I've ever had of my first deer hunt. I was almost replaying it in my head because that's something you'll never forget.
Yeah, that was great.
No.
Love that.
That's it.
All right, let's get into the 10 rapid fire questions then. All right, Fred, there are 8 million deer hunting tips out there. What's your number one of all time?
Wow, have fun. Don't get disappointed. Have fun. And if it's a trophy to you, it's a trophy to you, no matter what anybody else says.
Love it. All right, so there are these things that we bring into the woods with us that are good luck charms sometimes, or they're actually necessities that actually make us hunt better, but somehow we have an attachment to these items, and if we leave it in the truck, it drives us nuts all day in the field because we don't have it with us. What's that one thing for you?
A wind detector.
Wind detector. Very nice. All right. What's your biggest pet peeve?
Guys trying to push off their what's a trophy to them on someone else. If somebody shoots a smaller deer, whether it's a buck, a doe, or a cow elk, somebody else looking down on that animal, that really bothers me. I think again, a trophy is in the eyes of the hunter, and if it's if it's a trophy to you and you're shooting it for meat or just for the experience or for whatever reason, that's a very private, personal thing, and nobody should ever look down on another hunter for their decisions in the field.
I agree with you 100%. How old are you today, Fred?
49, sir.
49. All right. If you had to look back over time, what would you tell the 20-year-old Fred Eichler, knowing what you know today?
Take your time.
Take your time.
Sometimes the grass is always greener. I think of how many animals I've not harvested or made mistakes on where, I was just couldn't sit still enough. And a lot of times hunting has to do with slowing down a little bit and taking your time. But at the same time, I'm kind of high energy, and I'm not a real good, sometimes I'm not a real good waiter.
Gotcha. A little impatient sometimes. No, I can relate. Let's see. So you're at a hunting convention and you meet a stranger and you strike up a conversation. What they ask you what you do for a living. What do you tell them?
An outfitter.
Outfitter. Okay. What did you have for breakfast this morning?
Fresh eggs from our chickens.
I love fresh eggs from chickens. It's the best.
Yes, sir. No bacon, nothing else. I had fresh eggs from chickens, and one of our turkey clients brought some pecans. So I had some fresh eggs from the chickens and a couple pecans.
Fresh eggs from chickens just taste so much better than anything you can buy in the store. It goes for most meats too. I think they're just on another level.
So all the difference in the world.
Yep. All right. So you get your own billboard. It's a blank canvas. It's white. You can put anything on it you want. What does it say?
Wow.
It's a deep
Have
question.
fun. Enjoy yourself.
Enjoy yourself.
Life's short. Have a good time no matter what you're doing.
Okay. If I say the word successful to you, who's the first person that pops into your head and why?
Fred Bear.
Fred Bear.
In a lot of ways because he touched so many people, introduced a lot of people to a wonderful sport. But at the same time, he was a gentleman, and he also had a very successful business. He passed away in the 80s, and he's still a very commonly used name, when it comes to hunting circles. So he was a very successful, I think, businessman that did it the right way in my eyes in a lot of ways.
He's certainly influenced many people, not during his life, but even far after. It's quite amazing. All right. What's a day in the life of Fred Eichler look like?
Man, it's nuts. I love it, but it's crazy. It depends on the day. I mean, sometimes, here a couple of weeks ago, the whole family was out branding cattle. Last night, my two teenage boys were up all night working over at the farm because we got irrigation water running. So they were making sure the culvert didn't get clogged up with sticks. Some days we're on the tractor checking cattle, guiding clients, answering phone calls, some emails. Everybody here wears a bunch of hats, from my wife to our boys, and the guides as well. I've got guides that not only guide elk hunters and lion hunters, bear hunters, and deer, a little bit of everything. But they may be on a tractor one day, dozer the next. They may be on a horse the next, fixing fence. It's just we kind of all wear a lot of hats.
Gotcha. All right. So when you're not guiding somebody else on how to hunt or where to hunt or all that kind of good stuff, what's a deer hunting or predator hunting day in your life look like when you're going out for yourself?
Depends on conditions. If it's in the winter, and I've got good snow, then I'm usually looking for lion tracks or bobcat tracks that I can turn the hounds on. If it's a good still day, and a lot of times I'll take off and do some coyote hunting, call. If it's early fall, a lot of times I'll go out and try and shoot beavers, use the thermal vision or night vision, and try and shoot beavers that are jamming up the river. A lot of it depends on what the weather conditions are and what the hide prices are too. Sometimes I'll focus on an animal because the hide prices are good, or I'll have local ranchers call me up and say they're having issues with a coyote or a mountain lion or or bears or things like that. So it kind of varies.
Gotcha. All right, very good. So Fred, where can listeners who've listened to this show find more about you? I know you've got a TV show. Tell us where we can find information about the TV show, when it airs, online stuff, where can we find you on Facebook, YouTube, all that kind of stuff.
No problem. Well, I've got the Fred Eichler fan page that we usually post up pictures almost every day of what's going on. Maybe pictures of us farming, maybe pictures of animals my wife or the boys harvest or our clients harvest. So it's a Fred Eichler fan page. The TV shows are listed on there as well. I do Easton Bowhunting, I do Predator Nation, and then I do Ford Outfitters, which is another TV show that features Ford trucks, which I've got a few of here on the ranch, and our middle son drives Ford as well. And basically, we're traveling around with the guys from Ford and do different hunts and show features of the different Ford vehicles that are out there. So those are the 3 different TV shows that we do.
Very nice. Very, very cool. So do you know what your Facebook address is by any chance, or just type in Fred Eichler and we'll find it?
Yeah, if you type in fredeichler.com, it'll pull up, and then it's also got information that'll link you over to the outfitting business for guys that are interested in hunting. We do a little bit of everything here in Colorado.
Gotcha. All right, very good. Dusty, got any last questions for Fred before we let him go?
You got a phone number that the listeners can reach out to call you for booking outfitters?
It's better off to hit me on the email because we travel a bunch. So it's fredeichler@hotmail.com.
Good deal.
Very nice. Hey, Fred, this has been an honor and a pleasure, and thanks for spending an hour with us. I'm sure our listeners will greatly appreciate this interview and learning and a lot of stuff from you and picking your brain about a couple of different aspects of hunting, both predator and deer hunting. So we really appreciate you spending some time with us.
Hey, guys, it was my pleasure, and have fun out in the field. Be careful.
Now, listening to Fred talk about predator hunting and deer hunting, you can tell he's just been married to both of them for a very, very long time. And he just knows his stuff. And when we can get the chance to interview somebody that's been doing this for as long as he has, as much expertise, you're just going to have to sit back in your chair and soak it all in. And turn up your headset. And if you're planning to go predator hunting, if you're planning to go coyote hunting, some of the tips that he laid out for the common mistakes that we make when we start predator hunting are all laid out there right for you. And two of the other shows you should check out where we actually did an interview with Al Morris from Fox Pro Just do a search for Al Morris, and you'll find our other 2 episodes. If you combined the 2 Al Morris interviews and the Fred Eichler interview, you pretty much have everything you need to know to get started coyote hunting right now. And that's just one of the beauties of a podcast.
I don't know how to follow that up, but I tell you what, it's the guy knows his stuff. I've dabbled in some coyote hunting, and I'm by no means an expert, but I tell you what, there's a lot of information there, a lot that I could use.
I thought when he was talking about the turkey calls, and I don't know if you really think of it doing a turkey call for predators, but firsthand this year I shot a coyote at about 10 yards who came into my cluck when I was chasing this tom turkey. It was that we were both after the same tom turkey. Just so happens that he scared the turkey out of the field and heard the hen, which was me, calling in the woods, and of course the dog came in and met my shotgun, point blank.
Nice.
So it's interesting to know, and as Fred had discussed, that coyotes will respond to these types of calls. They will respond to calls that they're commonly hearing in their area, the things they're used to hunting. So it's always a good idea to open up, not necessarily with a call that everybody else has used and educated the coyote, but all those other things that are probably in the area that they are used to hunting, but they probably haven't heard yet. I thought that was probably the best tip I'd heard so far.
It makes complete sense. I've known a person personally who has tried that and had great success with it.
Gotcha. Very nice. So, Mike, you're filling in for Dusty, and we always have a Chubby Tines tip of the week. So I pre-prepped you for this particular segment. So what do we have for a Chubby Tines tip of the week this week? What should we be doing in our deer woods right now? The Chubby Tines tip of the week is sponsored by Morse's Sporting Goods. Firearms, used firearms, bows, used bows, located at 85 Kentucky Falls Road in Hillsborough, New Hampshire. Give Jim a call at 603-464-3444, morsessportinggoods.com. Your dollars go further in New Hampshire. There's no sales tax. Morse's Sporting Goods.
Man, those are some big boots to fill. Those are big hunting boots to fill, but
yes, they are. Very knowledgeable hunting boots, by the way.
Dusty, I hope he's not mad that I'm sitting in for him. I've had him on my show, so, I'm just trying to help out here a little bit.
Absolutely.
The one thing that I'm doing right now, actually, is I've got my cameras back in the field, my trail cams, and I'm starting to log inventory of what's going on, with our deer, how many deer we got on the property. We're going to be doing a trail cam survey here probably right around the 1st September. So that's really the big thing that I'm doing right now. I'm looking at stand location. Right now we've got a big logging project going on in our woods at our deer camp. So here in the next 3 weeks or so, I'm going to be hitting it real hard in the woods, making sure I got all my cameras out, start looking to see where they're at, where they're feeding at. I don't want to get into those real tight areas just yet, or on those trails. I want to get to those food sources and just see what we've got. That's really where my focus is right now, in prepping for some stand locations.
So kind of take an inventory of what's in your field.
Mm-hmm. You can see when you walk through, you got food plots and you see deer in them, but what have I really got there when I'm not around? My presence is going to be bumping deer. That's the big thing is trying to stay out of those areas as much as possible, but just let them feel at home, especially with this logging project going on right now. Yeah. It's changing things. So I'm really having to learn to, I guess, adapt to a new set of wood, so to speak.
That's very interesting. That's a great Chubby Tines tip of the week right there for sure. So, Mike, where can we find you when you're not hanging out with me, filling in for Dusty on the Big Buck Podcast?
You can find us at upnorthjournal.com. You can find us on Twitter underneath Up North Journal handle, and Facebook at Up North Journal as well, or on iTunes. Just search Up North Journal Podcast. So, and if I'm not there, then I'm hanging out in the deer woods. It's just plain simple right now. I think about it 365. That's my passion.
Yeah, hunting season is never over, really. It's just determined when you cannot carry a weapon into the woods. That's how I look at it.
Amen, brother.
That's right. Yes. Well, if you'd like to reach out to me, I can be reached at j@bigbuckregistry.com. That's the best place to reach me by email. You can check us out on Facebook, facebook.com/bigbuckregistry. Twitter is twitter.com/bigbuckregistry. You can kind of see the theme here. Same on Instagram, instagram.com/bigbuckregistry. If you would like to have your buck shared on our Facebook page in front of somewhere around, 230,000 diehard deer hunting fans and be famous for a day, all you have to do is go to bigbuckregistry.com/mybuck and all the instructions are right there on how to submit the deer. And just keep in mind, we're looking for the name of the hunter, a picture with the buck, and the state of the kill. And if you'd like to give us a call at 724-613-2825, definitely check out the Up North Journal podcast, both the TV version and the other version, which is all audio. Once you're not on our show or listening to our show, check out Mike over there at Up North Journal podcast. And if you would, please do this for me and for Mike. Do a search for Up North Journal podcast and Big Buck Registry. And when you find that, if you like our shows enough, leave us a 5-star review and hit the subscribe button. And you'll be having access to all of our shows and be notified each and every time a new episode comes up. Thanks to Fred Eichler for joining us on the Big Buck Podcast. Thanks to Morse's Sporting Goods for sponsoring the Chubby Tines Tip of the Week. I'm Jay Scott.
And I'm Mike Adams from the Up North Journal.
And this is another episode of the Big Buck Registry's Deer Hunting Podcast. We'll see you next week.
Can't wait.